Go ahead.
In alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. On behalf of my Muslim family, I'd like to welcome all of our viewers and guests today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Once again, we are holding our weekly live Q&A session related to issues on my Muslim families, whether it's parenting, family advice, anything and all things family related. And once again, it's my good pleasure to have with us our esteemed Shaykh Shaqur Rehman, who will be joining us and answering your questions. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very good. How's things?
Alhamdulillah, good. Alhamdulillah, very good. Inshallah, one third of the way through Ramadan and more, mashallah. It's gone very fast.
So quickly. Yeah, gone so quickly.
It has, subhanAllah. So, any advice you have for our viewers and guests before we get into questions in terms of how they can make the most of the remainder of Ramadan?
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Yani, at this point, after about 7 days of Ramadan, you see it's much easier to get into the masjid. And you can get there slightly later as well. And you'll still get comfortably towards the front. So this is where that period sets in, that people now have got into a bit of a routine, but there's a bit of a lull. And then it picks up again towards the last 10. So if you imagine that at this point, people are kind of set in their ways and stop pushing themselves. So those who actually want to maximize their Ramadan are going to take this opportunity to make themselves stand out in front of Allah. Because now a lot of people have taken their foot off the gas. So this is our opportunity to actually shine and be noticed by Allah more than the rest. And it's easier to do that at this point. So this is the point where we should be increasing, because we're in the second third of Ramadan now. We should be increasing on what we've done in the first 10 days and getting ready to be able to do the full increase, floor the pedal to the, floor it basically in the last 10. So here is not a time to kind of slack. It's a time to actually motivate yourself. Now, how do you motivate yourself? Go through the hadith that talk about the blessings of Ramadan. Go through the reminders that are specific to the virtues of Ramadan once again. Reawaken that reminder within you, and therefore motivation to do even more good. And another thing that is very crucial at this time, buddy up with someone who's on a similar page to you. They have similar targets to you, and pair up with them so that you can take each other to account and push each other. Because if you don't have someone to push you and you're pushing them, it gets very easy to kind of let your foot off the gas and become complacent, especially in this middle part of Ramadan. So may Allah give you all tawfiq to excel in these middle days, and then even more so in the last 10.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh, for that really great reminder. Definitely it's something to take heed of. And definitely I think many of us can relate about the packedness of the masjids. It's when I went there with my son, and I took my neighbour's boy with me as well, we literally were on the staircase. And we just about got a spot to pray. So alhamdulillah, it's great to see though the Muslims turning up in such huge numbers. MashaAllah, tabarakallah.
At least you
We'll
got
get
inside
into
the
the first.
masjid.
Yes, that's true. Actually, many people were outside as well. Subhanallah. Yeah. So that's so actually don't think we should be grateful for that as well. Subhanallah. Very true. Alhamdulillah. We will get into our questions now. So we've got about 6-7 questions today. So I'll start, inshallah. The first question is as follows. My sons had an argument and it turned physical. I got hurt and I'm now in a knee brace. Some horrible things were said by my eldest son to my 18-year-old about him finding his dead dad. Now my sons don't talk. I lost my husband in November 2021, and since then, I have lost my home. My other 5-year-old son, who suffers from major health conditions, had a massive asthma attack. I found out my daughter self-harms. My eldest son has mental health issues, unstable personality disorder in brackets. I haven't been able to grieve for my husband of 24 years. I'm just so fed up and I don't know what to do about my sons not talking. So that is the question, Sheikh. Quite a lot to unpack.
طيب, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. First and foremost, may Allah make it easy for the sister. A lot of issues going on in her life. Now, the starting point for all of this is to remember the statement of Allah that He repeats in a few places in the Qur'an, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that Allah does not burden a soul with more than it can bear. And secondly, that إن الله يحب الصابرين, that Allah loves the patient ones. Okay, now in these bleak times, the difficulties that you're facing, the easy thing is what Shaitan is whispering to you. You've got too much on your plate, you can't handle it, this is too much. And he wants you to give up. He wants you to buckle under the pressure, if you like. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ has been given the guidance from Allah. And in the revelation, Allah says that no, whatever trials He sends your way, it's only to test you, and He's never going to test you with more than you can actually bear. So you need to start zooming out of all of these problems and not try to tackle everything at once, and not try to think of everything at once such that it would overwhelm you, but take piece by piece. What is your responsibility? Sister, you said that, how can I get my sons to start talking again? This is not the biggest thing in your life, okay? This is not, although it would be desirable and it is really good, yet this is not the most important thing in your life, right? First of all, find your center, find the perspective that you need to have. Once you've got that, then you can start picking up piece by piece. So first and foremost, remember that Allah is with you when you're going through trials. Okay? When Allah says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Okay? He says that I'm going to test you with all of these different things, something of fear, something of poverty, something of loss of loved ones, loss of provisions, something of this. I'm going to touch you with these tests. That's what He promised us. He didn't promise us a life of luxury and, calm nature and tranquility and enjoying ourselves. No, Allah promised us that He's going to test us. And then He said, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. And He very, very different to what you would expect. Someone who's going through trial and tribulation, you're meant to show them empathy and sympathy, etc. Allah actually says, give them glad tidings. They're going through so much, give them glad tidings. Why? Because at the moment you are afflicted and you're going through those trials, Allah is with you in a way that He has never been with you before. And He loves you more when you're going through trials and persevering and sticking to your faith and increasing in your faith than He loves you in other times. As the Prophet ﷺ said, أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاء ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلَ فَالْأَمْثَلَ. This is the way of the greatest of the believers, the prophets. Those who are tested the most, as the Prophet ﷺ said, are the Anbiya, the prophets, and then those who are most like them, then those who are most like them. So first and foremost, Allah is testing you, my dear sister, to show you how much He loves you. Just keep that in your heart. That is your focus. He's testing you because He loves you. And if He didn't love you, He wouldn't test you. So because He's testing you, He loves you. Put that in the center of your heart and mind. Now, piece by piece, start by looking at the situation. Now, you have a responsibility to yourself and your Lord, which is that you worship Him. So make sure your obligatory deeds are in order. Make sure all of your obligations are being done. Your obligations, what are they? Your prayer, your fasting, your dhikr, your recitation of Qur'an. Unfortunately, many households, they don't read Qur'an on a regular basis every day in their houses. That makes sure you have a good portion of Qur'an, and especially in the day and the night. If you can have these two portions, once in the day, one in the night, it will enlighten and illuminate your heart and bring barakah to your life and keep you focused on the direction you're heading. That is to Allah. Okay? As we say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. The truth of the matter is, to Allah we belong, and to Allah is the return. As long as we are doing our duty to Allah, whether other people do their duty or they don't, in front of Allah, we are absolved and we have nothing on us. And to meet Allah with nothing against you, that is the goal. Then you'll be distanced from the hellfire and you'll be entered into Jannah with the permission of Allah, with His rahmah, with His mercy. So the obligations for you, first and foremost, fix those. Now, the obligation on you is still to care for your children. Okay? Show each one care, give them time, and especially the younger ones who are, you mentioned the 5-year-old. Maybe there's other children you haven't mentioned in this. But those who are still young and under your care and who are not adults, they deserve more attention than the adults themselves. So give them more attention. Now, you cannot control illnesses. You cannot control what happens tomorrow to any party in your family. So take that out of your hands and leave it in the hands of Allah, because that is where it belongs. So Allah does with His slaves whatever He wants. So turn to Allah for the affairs. Spend lots of time in dua for your children. But understand that you cannot stop the trials and tests of Allah from coming to them. Leave it to Allah. That's their test. That's their trial. Yes, help them as much as you can. But understand that you are not able to fix all of these problems and all of these things. Many times we overburden ourselves thinking that we should fix all these things or we can fix all these things. But in reality, we can't. These are all things in the hands of Allah. All we can do is direct, guide, point people to the right direction. But the outcomes, they're with Allah. They're not with us. So take that burden off your shoulders and spend more time making dua for your children, and that they overcome these problems and they have their iman during these problems, because that is more worthy than actually overcoming the problem. If you have problems yet you still have your iman and you're facing challenges with your iman, it is much better than if you overcome all problems and you lose part or most of your iman. So, sister, treat it like this. Look at your obligations, deal with those. Your care to your younger children more so than your older children. Then, how do you reconcile the hearts? Well, all you can do is try. And that is a noble effort. Try. Good words to this one about the other one, good words to this one about the other one. Try. But understand that the hearts are, as the Prophet ﷺ said, بَيْنَ أَصَابِعِ الرَّحْمَنِ. They are between the fingers of Allah. يُقَلِّبُهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ. Allah turns them as He pleases. Okay? So the controller of hearts is Allah. You can't mend the hearts. You can only try. But the outcome is with Allah. And it's not upon you to fix that. So take each thing step by step. Your focus, Allah loves you. Your center, your obligations to Allah, fulfill those. Make lots of dua for your children as much as possible, especially in the blessed times like the last third of the night. Then care for your youngest children who are not adults, etc. Give them more attention than you would normally. Your older children, guide them, direct them, but don't think you can solve their problems. Nor is it an obligation on you to solve their problems. For you to direct them and let them make their own choices. But make sure that you guide them to look for Allah's guidance in all of their challenges. May Allah help you, sister, and all of the sisters and brothers who are in similar predicaments. May Allah lighten your burdens and give you the tawfiq to establish His worship, His obligations, and may Allah make it easy for all of you and all of your families.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. So just to remind everyone that you're tuning in live to My Muslim Family's live Q&A session. We're taking questions related to family, parenting, marriage, all things related. So if you do have any questions, you can comment on the comments box, and we'll pick out some questions if we have any time. So moving on to our next question, Sheikh. We've got a couple of Ramadan questions actually who are related. The first one is as follows. My husband doesn't like for me to go to the masjid for Tarawih as we have young children. We have to leave them with my mother-in-law. He says it burdens his mother, and the children, who are toddlers, get agitated when they wake up and their mother is not at home. They do cry if they don't see me at home, but I want them to get used to it as I am going for the deen. That's the question.
Okay. If your husband, rather, sister, doesn't want you to burden your mother-in-law, then this is something that you need to take very seriously, because a lot of people, a lot of sisters, they, may Allah reward them in their zeal for wanting to join the Muslims in the masajid. At the same time, we should remember that for the sister, praying in the masjid is an optional deed. Okay, it's an optional deed, a recommended deed. Okay, yet her prayer at home is better for her than the prayer in the masjid. And the obligation upon her is to make her husband happy and to do that which makes him happy. Right? In this scenario, your husband is going to be much more happy with you or happier with you if you went up to burden your mother-in-law. So you can combine going to the masjid if you take your children with you. Now, in some of the big masajid, you have a mother and toddlers prayer area, and sisters go and they take their young ones to that area, and they pray there and they look after their children as best as they can, and all other sisters in the same predicament, in the same prayer area. So perhaps find a masjid where you have that kind of facility, so you don't burden your mother-in-law, and that way your husband is more pleased with you, and you can also pray in the masjid without any problems. So that's one kind of solution. Another way to do it is maybe not go for the main Taraweeh. In these days, now there's more masajid that have Qiyamul Layl rather than the Taraweeh, or along with the Taraweeh. So the Taraweeh is straight after Isha. So currently, many masajid are praying around 9:15, 9:20, something like that, or 9:30, the Isha Salah. Then they have Taraweeh straight after that. Many masajid now, especially in London, I'm not sure if the questioner is from London, but especially in London and other areas, you find masajid that have Qiyamul Layl much later. So some may start at 12:30, 1 o'clock, something like that. So maybe that first portion, your husband goes and he prays in the masjid with the congregation, and then either your kids will be more into deep sleep during the later time of the night, and the later time of the night is more beloved and more rewardful to pray in than the early part of the night. So rather than going in the Taraweeh time, go in the Qiyamul Layl time, where it's less likely for your children to wake up, possibly, and that way it doesn't trouble your mother-in-law, and therefore your husband's happier with you. You could also have your own Taraweeh at home. You know, um, you can, according to many scholars, you can hold the Mus'haf and you can read from the Mus'haf. Okay, so you could take this option, which is a third option. You could also have your husband come home and you both pray your own Taraweeh or Qiyamul Layl together at home, where the children are still with you and you're praying together and you have your own Taraweeh. So these are 4 other possibilities that you can look at. But what I advise the sister is, if your husband has made this statement to you, take it seriously and don't just stick to what you're doing. Change what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, we want to maximize our rewards in this month of Ramadan. When the Prophet ﷺ, he said the famous statement that if a woman صلت خمسها, she prays her 5 daily prayers, وصامت شهرها, and she fasts her obligatory fasts, وحفظت فرجها, and she guards her chastity, وأطاعت بعلها أو زوجها, and she obeys her husband, then it will be said to her, enter from any of the 8 gates of paradise you wish. So it tells you the reward for making your husband happy and to taking on board what he's asked you is greater than any of these other optional deeds. So don't lose out on this magnificent reward that is there for the taking for you, my sister, by making your husband happy. And Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Okay, so moving on to our next question. Okay. My daughter is still in primary school and baligh. Fasting is now furrowed on her, but the school teachers have remarked that she is too young. I want to encourage her, but I am scared of the ramifications from the social services if the teachers report it. What should I do?
Okay, now it would be good to know what age or what year the child is in school. Normally, in a lot of primary schools around the country, they do have policies, especially where there's a large Muslim population, where normally from the age of year 5 and year 6, they do allow children to fast. Right now, we have entered into the Easter holidays, so things should be easy because kids are not at school. So these 2 weeks, Easter holidays here for most children, might be slightly different if someone's in another part of the country like Wales or Scotland, etc. But here we have 2 weeks off right now, so that should ease the situation because they're not at school. Now, the child is baligh, so it's obligatory for her to fast. So that you need to go to the head teacher and you need to speak to the head teacher and say, right, our religious requirements are that my child be allowed to fast because it's an obligation on her, because she's reached puberty, and therefore our faith dictates that she must fast. So have that conversation with the head teacher, because at the end of the day, the management and the goings on in the school are really down to what the head teacher allows. So the head teacher can make a discretion when and if they want to. So go down that route first. Now, if that doesn't work, then you have to escalate it by perhaps getting other parents to support you and maybe even making an official complaint. But before you go down that route and escalate things, but you need to have that conversation first and foremost with the head teacher and see how that goes. Normally, they do make allowances for the issue of Ramadan. So you shouldn't be scared of social services and all of this, and create within yourself a paranoia. This is our faith. Ramadan is something that every child is taught about in their RE lessons and the religious education. They're taught about Islam and the symbols of Islam. From them, this pillar of Islam, Ramadan. So you should take that fear out of you. This is shaitan's whisperings and nothing other than that. There is no issue with you telling your school this requirement that you have for your child, because this is an Islamic obligation. You can even get the local masajid. In our areas, we have committees where the masajid in the boroughs have come together, and there's an umbrella organization where all of them are part of. You can get letters from this type of organization saying that they support you and they want the school to do something. So all of this can happen, and they have an obligation. The school have an obligation to make provision for your Islamic practices. So take the fear out of yourself. These are just mere whisperings of shaitan. Nothing's going to happen to you. And even if the school has a really, let's just say, for argument's sake, an evil head teacher who doesn't like religion, etc. Yani each school, or each borough rather, has an organization called Sakri, which looks after the religious provisions for students in schools. So the council has that, the borough has that. You can complain to them, but don't fall to these whisperings of shaitan. Do what you need to do to allow your child to be able to fast, as Islamically it's an obligation on them. The child's obligation is to fast, and the parent's obligation is to facilitate their fasting. So both of you are under the obligation of the Sharia to do what you can to make sure this obligation on your child is established. Don't have any fear. There's a lot of backing. And if you have problems, then if you don't know where to go, send us a message, and we'll definitely get some guidance on schools and how to deal with them, and send them towards to your email. Just make sure you do something and do everything in your power to get your child, or facilitate for your child, to fast during Ramadan. May Allah make it easy. And as I said, drop us an email if you need further help, and then we'll point you in the right direction, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. So, as Sheikh mentioned, you can contact us, drop us an email. You can email us at info@mymuslimfamily.com, and we will endeavor to respond to you immediately, inshallah. Okay, so the next question. My family lives in a rural area in the west, and we are the only Muslims. The local masjid is 30 minutes away. We are a practicing family, i.e., do the fara'id and avoid the haram as much as we can. What can we do to create a more Islamic environment at home?
طيب. It is not ideal to live so far away from the Muslim community. Yeah, so I would never advise someone to live so far away from the Muslims. You can only go so far in creating the Islamic environment in your house, because remember, yani, Islam is about ijtima, or coming together, i'tilaf, yani being together. The masjid, yani men going to the masjid 5 times a day, tells you that yani Islam is about that community. It's not enough to have a Muslim household. So really, my sincere advice to you guys who are living so far away from the masjid, 30 minutes drive from the local masjid, I would really seriously suggest that you think about moving from where you are to a place that has an established Muslim community. We shouldn't live alone. We shouldn't live so far away from other Muslims. It's detrimental to our iman and the iman of our children growing up. They need to see Muslims together. Now, until you do this, what I would suggest is that, yes, it's 30 minutes. Make sure you take your children to the masjid, at least, and especially in Ramadan during the night time. Even the young ones, take them to the masjid, take them with you, keep them by your sides. The whole family go and spend your Isha and Taraweeh in the masjid, and just chill out in the masjid afterwards. See the people coming and going. Let your children sense that they are part of this greater collective. And make sure that when it comes to Jumu'ah, you also take them and let them see that you are part of this huge collective. And go to a major masjid, even if it's an hour's drive or 2 hours drive. Take it upon yourself, especially in Ramadan, do these types of things. When it comes to Eid as well, make sure you go to one of these Eids in the park where you have tens of thousands of people who attend, even if it means you have to travel 2 hours to get there. Make sure, because your children are growing up in an area where the only thing they're seeing apart from your household is non-Muslims, make sure you make them sense that they are part of this huge collective. Yani, whenever is possible, that's what you need to do. So, you mentioned in the household that you have these things going on. You do the fara'id, you stay away from the haram. Yeah, have Islamic lectures, but the home is only part of the Islamic environment. They need to see, especially your children, they need to see we are part of a huge ummah. Really, if you can, go as a family to Umrah and show them the size of the ummah that they are part of, that would be something ideal. But really, I think from what you've described so far, I would suggest these types of things for now. Taraweeh, take the whole family, spend the time in the masjid, watch people leave so they see the huge crowds, people coming and people going, that they are part of this. Jumu'ah, same thing. Make sure you do this. When it comes to Eid, make sure you do this. Any big gatherings that you hear about, go to Islamic lectures. Whether you have to travel far, make sure you go so they see that they are part of an ummah. I think that will give them pride and courage and self-esteem more so than the individual ibadat that we do in our homes and that we can implement. They do need that, yes, 100%. They need the Islamic learning, but they need to be in gatherings. Another thing that you should look for is groups that you have those outings either as whole families or as they take the teenagers, the youngsters out on retreats and programs like that, and send your children to those types of things where they're amongst a large group of other Muslims doing different activities along with their salahs and their Islamic learning, etc. So look for those types of activities and have them spaced out through the year as well. And Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So next question. My husband is very practicing and tries his best to be a good Muslim. However, he gives all his free time to an Islamic organization. I don't see him on most weekends, evenings, and holidays due to him volunteering at the very active Islamic organization. He has no relationship with me or our children, and our marriage seems to be breaking down. I studied Islam in depth with various scholars and was very practicing. However, at times I have even considered leaving Islam because of the way I have been treated and the effect it has had on my mental health. How do I make him understand that not being with us is destroying our family?
May Allah guide this sister and strengthen her iman. Sister, the first thing I would say is remember that your hereafter is not worth being sacrificed for any human being, whoever they may be. Your hereafter is more important because that is eternal. That is never ending bliss or never ending pain. So that should make you realize that, you know what, anything in this dunya, whatever it is, it's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ said. You know, the Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih Muslim, the whole dunya and everything in it is if you were to take your finger, put it in the sea, put it out, and the drop has left your finger. You have a small little bit of film on your finger of the moisture that was left over from the water that has dripped from your finger. That is the world and everything in it. And the ocean that you just took that drop from is the hereafter. You would not sell that ocean for that small piece of moisture on your finger. That is the likeness of this world compared to the hereafter. So remember, that is what we're talking about. Eternal bliss or eternal punishment. No one is worth eternal punishment. Now, secondly, dealing with your own iman is very important. Okay, make sure you're doing your obligations. Push yourself, force yourself. Understand that this is your relationship with Allah. If you don't fix your relationship with Allah, no other relationship in the world is going to be fixed. As the scholars used to advise themselves, Man aslaha ma baynahu wa bayna Allah, aslaha Allahu ma baynahu wa bayna an-nas. Whoever corrects that which is between them and Allah, Allah will correct for them their affairs between them and the people. So take this advice from the scholars that they used to impart on each other, take it to heart, and start rectifying your relationship with Allah, because everything starts from there. Right. Secondly, if you're feeling this loneliness, you know, every weekend away from the family for a husband is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. If the family is feeling this kind of burden that they're very lonely and there's no relationship in the marriage, etc., this is an unacceptable state to be in. So the first thing you need to do is to make it clear to your husband. You need to have that conversation, you know, but build up to that conversation. You know, make him a nice meal, get him comfortable so he's sitting, relaxed, and then once he's eaten, once he's relaxed, then have that conversation. Look, we really need your company. You being away every single weekend is not Islamic. You might be doing these other things, but what's the point of all of that if you are causing us to suffer, those people who are meant to be closest to you? And the Prophet ﷺ didn't allow for his family to be neglected because he was doing other deeds. So balance is the key. Now, how will your husband listen? Because husbands generally, they have this tendency of not to listen immediately to the wife. So maybe you need to escalate it to someone that can convince your husband, whether it's a friend of his that he listens to and accepts, getting the comments to that person to convey it to him, whether it's a scholar that he listens to, whether it's saying, look, this is unacceptable. Either things change or, you know what, our marriage is coming to an end. And this is kind of the last step. If you couldn't get him to listen in any other way, the last step would be, right, we need to go to counseling. Otherwise, I don't see a future in our marriage. Having that kind of conversation. And then if it needs to be the case, you apply to marriage counseling or to an Islamic Sharia council, like Islamic council, and you say, I'm going to apply for a khul'a, not intending that you're going to finish the marriage, but making the point very clear to your husband that this kind of behavior is going to cause our marriage to come to an end. It's unacceptable. Some people, unfortunately, won't take heed until things become really serious. So let me go through the steps again. Number one, focus on your relationship between you and Allah. Fix that relationship, because that will cause other relationships to become fixed. Then, number two, have a nice meal for your husband prepared. Let him come in, have the meal, relax. When he's in a good mood, sit down and have that conversation with him. A frank conversation of how you feel, where you are, how you don't see there's a relationship between you, alluding to the fact things can't go on like this. If he listens, well and good. If he doesn't, escalating that, maybe using people who are influential in his life to convey to him the same message. Do that for a while. That doesn't work. Then you escalate it even further. You say to him that, look, if things don't change, I'm going to have to speak to a Sharia council and maybe apply for finishing the marriage. So more of a threat than anything else, but to make it known that it's very serious. That doesn't have any effect, then you actually apply and get him in, either for counseling or in the process of khul'ah. Because maybe, even though you have children, you need to think about, if this is not going to be a marriage where he plays his role as the husband, maybe it's not the right thing for you to continue with. So these are generally the steps that I advise you to take, and each one of them needs minimum a month to 3 months to work on that particular part of it. So this is not an easy 1, 2, 3 steps. No, it's a long process that you need to work on, especially when you have children. May Allah make it easy for you and anyone in a similar predicament.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So the next question. Right. As the wedding season will start after Ramadan, I know of some of my relatives' wedding will have un-Islamic practices such as music, free mixing, what I think is imitating kuffar, such as bride walking down the aisle and the father putting her hand in the husband's hand in front of the guests, husband and wife cutting cake and feeding each other in front of non-mahram guests, and other un-Islamic practices, including what seems like Hindu practices such as yellow dresses in Mendi and coloured powder thrown. Do I need to avoid these weddings? That's one question. Second question, will that be severing ties of kinship? And lastly, if I should attend, what do I need to do to avoid bringing sins on myself? So there's kind of 3 parts to that question.
Okay. Now, this is a common thing. Unfortunately, it's very common during wedding seasons. Now, let me deal with it slightly different to the way it's numbered. So, the first thing I would say, what is keeping the ties of kinship? What does it mean? Silatul Rahim. What does it actually mean? It means being there for your relatives in those occasions and those times where you need to be there for them. And at the same time, that it doesn't include partaking in sin with them. But at the same time, there's ways of mitigating the issue and still trying to keep the ties of kinship and show them, yeah, you're still family. Any family members, not all of our family members, not even mine, yeah, not even many scholars, not everyone is going to be as practicing as us or practicing even, okay? Very minimal Muslims. We're going to have some of those in our relatives, etc. So, in these types of weddings, you should have a policy. You know what? I don't go to these weddings because they have music and they have all of these types of things that the sister described, which are imitation of either the Christians or the Hindus or other than them, right? So you make it known to your relatives. I don't attend these types of weddings, but I am really pleased you're getting married. And you go before the marriage, you go to their houses, you go to the segregated events if there are some, because still, the mandis are normally done segregated, or the majority of them. So you might go to that particular event, but not the actual wedding itself, where there's all of the other stuff that you described. But you go before the wedding and you give them a gift and you show your happiness that they're getting married. Because at the end of the day, they're getting married. Marriage, yani, which means they're not in a haram relationship, they're in a marriage. So that is ta'awun al-birr. Yani, that is helping each other towards that which is righteousness. Because marriage is part of righteousness. Okay, they're doing all of these other things that you don't have control over. Congratulate them on the marriage, give them a gift, go and see them before the marriage, go and see them after the marriage, give your congratulations, maybe even invite the bride and groom to your house, feed them with their parents, etc. And mitigate things like this. Don't attend the wedding itself with all of this haram in it. Yeah, definitely you wouldn't. Why are you going to get involved in the sin that they're committing? Make it very clear to your family members, this is my stance. I don't attend these types of weddings, but at the same time, you're still my relatives and I love good for you, and this is why I'm giving you the gift. I'm congratulating your marriage, but as for the event itself, I can't attend. So be very frank with them. Yes, some of the relatives are going to be a bit upset and say this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, without principles, then who are we? What makes us Muslims is the principles that we stand for and the benefit that we bring to mankind. These two issues define you as a person and define your worth as a person. What you stand for and the benefit you bring to others. So do it like this, and people know what's haram and what's not haram, etc. And they know what kind of event you'd attend, you won't attend. So then once you've established this norm throughout the family, it will become easier. The beginning is always difficult to establish. This is who I am. These are my principles. It's a bit awkward in the beginning, but once you get over this awkwardness, people understand where you are, and you're there for their benefit, and you're there to keep ties. But these are your limits. You don't attend these types of things. And if you do this, and you're firm and consistent on this, people will value you because you're a principled person. So don't compromise your principles, but at the same time, don't go to the other extreme where you cut off from them. No, you mitigate all of that by seeing them at the events or partaking in the events that are segregated. They don't have those harams involved. If they have only haram events, then you go to them at other times, give them the congratulations, gifts, etc. And you follow up after the events have happened by congratulating them on the marriage itself. And Allah knows best.
So we have a very similar related question. I will ask it, which is as follows. While segregation exists at weddings and is observed by practicing sisters and brothers, segregation is not observed elsewhere in society, for example with non-Muslim colleagues. In some cultures, weddings were a place for parents to find new suitors, rishtas. With the current difficulty for practicing brothers and sisters in finding a spouse, could we reduce segregation at weddings so that families can sit at the table with other families? Elders would be there so it wouldn't be free mixing. In Mauritius, at weddings, you can literally point out a sister you are interested in, and your family would inquire there and then who she is. Weddings thus allowed new marriages to form, but this would require non-segregation. Could this be allowed because of the current difficulty in marrying?
Okay, interesting way to think about things, right? Remember, Islamically, you want a wife who's going to be good to you. I'm assuming this is a brother asking the question, actually, you know that. But we could deal with it from both sides, right? So here, Nanny, if you look at this, how are you going to find a spouse, right? How Islamically do you find a spouse? Is it just you pointing someone out, or is it much bigger than that? A marriage in Islam is not about just the two people, the man and the woman, who are getting married. This is a complete mistake. This is not Islamic. The marriage has many stakeholders. The family on each side are great stakeholders in the marriage itself. So it's not about you pointing someone out and saying, yeah, I'm interested, and then your family. No, your family should know you're looking to get married, and they should be on the lookout wherever they are. So normally, the way this works is the female members look for their their sons, or the males in their family. They look. If they find someone, and the mothers normally get involved in this kind of introduction or chatting. Segregation doesn't stop this from happening. In fact, it makes it easier. Women amongst women, it's easier for them to have that chat and have those conversations than it is in any other setting. And mothers and older sisters and aunties, they always have those discussions, whether at weddings or other female gatherings, etc. They'll always be looking out. So this is the way it's always worked. And outside of that, there are other ways of communication as well. Families need to get to know each other and be in vicinities where they can communicate. And those types of communications are especially prevalent at female gatherings. Women are the ones at the center of arranging marriages. It's always been the case. And humanity has always had this as the crux of it. And it's not going to change. So giving women their space to be able to have those conversations with ease and in a place of security and freedom where they can have those conversations without feeling they're being watched and there's other people around, etc. That facilitates it far more than having non-segregated events. So the whole concept is foreign to Islam. And if we want to have Allah's blessings and the good Islamic marriages, you can't start it off on the wrong foot. It has to be started off on the right foot. Now, what is the Islamic guidance when it comes to interacting with men and women? We know the guidance. It's formal interactions, to segregate whenever we can, to have their own separate spaces whenever they can. Yes, there is interaction in the marketplaces, and that's always going to be the case, and that was always the case. Where you can't facilitate it, you don't have control, you have to just make the best of the situation. But where you have control, you are obligated to follow the guidance of the Sharia when it comes to interaction between men and women. There is going to be some interaction that has to be formal, that can't be informal, and the rest of it, the hijab and the rest of it, that is known. So trying to move away from that is never going to produce good results, because Allah is Al-Hakim. Allah is Ar-Rahim. Allah is Ar-Rahman. He is the most wise. He is the loving, the caring, the merciful. That is Allah. And from His wisdom, with His love and His mercy, to facilitate the best outcomes, He legislated segregation. If we try to move away from it, thinking we're going to produce better results, we've lost our principles, and we're only going to produce worse and dangerous results. So I advise the brother, or the sister who's asking the question, stick to the guidance of Allah, and you will find much better fruits and consequences in that guidance, as is always the case. And Allah knows best.
Sheikh. So, alhamdulillah, we've got viewers all across the globe, from Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh, Nigeria. So they've been tuning in. We actually do have a question as well for one of the guests. You can actually see this as well in the comment section. It's a short question. And it's Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Please, what is the ruling on whether women should cover their hair when Qur'an is being played in the house?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There is no need for a woman inside her house, if she's in front of non-mahrams, to cover her hair. This is more so a cultural practice. And some do it out of more respect for the Book of Allah. Yet there's no actual obligation for her to cover whilst reading the Quran. So she can do so without hijab, etc. And there's no issue with that. Okay, the requirement is that she is in a state of wudu when touching the Quran. But other than that, there's no requirement of hijab in reciting or reading the Quran, let alone the Quran being recited or played in the house. So it's more of a cultural thing where certain cultures view it as a sign of respect, but it's not a religious obligation at all. So there's nothing on the sister if she doesn't wear her headscarf or etc. When the Quran is being played, or even when she recites it. It's only mandatory for her when she prays her salah to cover and wear her hijab. And even that, she doesn't cover her face when there's no mahrams, when there's non-mahrams, when there's no non-mahrams around. She doesn't cover her face. If there's non-mahrams around, then she does cover her face. But the salah itself, other than that, for Quran by itself, then there's no obligation on her to wear the headscarf or the hijab at all. And Allah knows best.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, and I think we've hit 3 o'clock almost, so and that was quite a packed Q&A session today. So I think quite a lot of Ramadan questions we had, and marriage questions. It is going to be marriage season in the summer, so I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions at that point as well. So Sheikh, Jazakallah khair once again for these
No
sessions,
problem.
very beneficial. And to our viewers, I'd like to thank you for attending. And inshallah, we'll be back very soon. Again, on behalf of the team here, we'd like to hope you have a good remaining Ramadan, inshallah. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.